Hello everyone. Yeah, so I've been meaning to do this video for a while, and it's basically a question that someone put to me the other day, and I'm not going to say who this person was because they contacted me privately, so I'm respecting their privacy, but their question kind of opened up to other questions that people have given me before, and I think they are valid about the creative process. I think they are valid about the right medium for the work that you do, kind of what you need to be aware of, collaboration, and so I'll try and get these done as concisely as I can do and as honestly as I can do, because I'm going to say a few things here and some of it you might not be prepared for, because it's, you know, they could be a bit harsh, but it's also based on experience, so I hope you'll take that for what it is. Obviously, if you can find the way to get your work out there first time, awesome, and respect to you for however you managed to crack it. But this is basically what I'm kind of warming up to. Alrighty then, so let's get cracking. Okay, so one issue that we have with this kind of thing, because often you get kind of these kind of side questions that then come up after this question. So, should I turn my comic into a screenplay? How do I protect my ideas? Who should I work with? You know, ... And all of them kind of branch out in different directions. So my first suggestion to you is get your idea down first. Whatever your idea is, just get it done. Like, if you have a day job, write down ideas on your lunch break or on the bus home. And when you're at home or wherever you're comfortable working, do whatever work you can do. Because, you know, some people will do it with word counts. Some people will say, like, I'm going to do X amount per day or whatever. And like I say, for some people, if you're one of these talented folk that can not only write but also do the artwork as well, then again, you've got that stage to think about as well. So, you know, outlining, penciling, inking, colouring, whatever aspects that you do or you can do in collaboration with other people, those are elements that you need to think of. And again, we're going to kind of cover a bit of that later on. So that's a big thing, and it's really important to have a first draft. Like, the first draft is not going to be perfect, and then that is something, though, you have, and it's in front of you, and you can look at it, and then you can sort of be critical of it. Now, I'm going to talk about feedback in a minute, but first up, if you're doing this yourself, and you don't necessarily want to approach other people straight away, and that's understandable, what I would suggest is give yourself a couple of days, you know, like, put your first draft away for a bit, because I think then it's easier to give yourself a bit of distance away from what you've written. Because you do kind of have this thing when you're a writer, like, people kind of oscillate between, yeah, my work's awesome, and oh, my work's rubbish, and it's like, it's very rarely one or the other. And it's about kind of what you have and sort of moulding it into what you want. And this is where feedback comes in, which is what we're going to cover now. Okay, so now we're going to talk about getting feedback. Now, I've seen some people post online being very negative about creative writing courses, about, you know, degrees in this kind of subject, etc., etc. And what I'm going to tell you is what I personally thought was the benefit, because I studied English and media at the University of Chichester, and one of the elements that for me was really good, so I managed to get onto the screenwriting module after a bit of legal jumping through hoops. Technically I wasn't supposed to be on that one. And also, I did 3 years of creative writing workshops as part of my English degree, which was absolutely fantastic. And the reason it was fantastic was the degree of feedback you got from the workshops. And I think it's important to get feedback on your work, ideally from someone who gets where you're coming from and will give you the advice you need. Because the danger is, like, say if you do it with friends and family, you might get some who are nervous about sort of telling you what you need to hear, and might, like I say, sugarcoat it or not kind of give you the advice you need. or go too far the other way and get really tough on it, which could, sort of hit your confidence. So ideally what you want is someone reasonably connected, so that they kind of know the kind of thing that you're trying to do, and can offer feedback. And there are plenty of people that can do this on a professional level, and will be able to sort of say, well, I can see what you're trying to do. Have you considered ... And it's in this part that you listen to what they have to say, and you don't have to necessarily follow everything that someone tells you, but think about it and think, does my story work? Like I say, put aside for a minute, don't think about graphic novels, screenplays, whatever. What about the fundamentals of the story that you are writing? Does it make sense? Does it come together? Even if it's, a non-linear story, there still has to be something from it, some kind of through line that people experience it will still get what you're getting at, even if it's something that you're pitching on a kind of metaphorical, slightly surreal level, or like you say, or it might just be a more linear story. Does it work? Does it tie together? If you have a twist, does the twist make sense? Have you equally it can go too far the other way. Have you signposted the twist? And it's all these little sort of balances that we've talked about before in other videos, and it is about kind of listening to that feedback and then deciding where you want to go for it. Now, for me, I would say maybe get a couple of different people's feedbacks, but don't go overboard, because the problem is with too many voices, and again, I experienced this on an academic level as well, is that it can be very, very hard to sort of try and balance out all these voices and still sort of stay true to what you're going for, because that is still important too, that there still has to be a thing at the core of it that you feel strongly about. And this is the crucial thing, and this is something that we're going to talk about in a minute, because it is about how far you are willing to go to the next level. Because these things, if you really believe in them, require a certain level of commitment, which we're going to talk about now. Okay, so this next part is about, what kind of support that you want to kind of bring onto your project. Because again, this is where you have to ask some tough questions about yourself. So hopefully, by the time we have got to this stage, you have a first draft, you have feedback. You may or may not have chosen to do a second draft. You may have chosen to re-edit it. That depends on, like I said, what level you feel you're at this current point. Now, here is where we get talking about the crux of the question that someone asked, like, should we turn this graphic novel idea into a screenplay? And of course, this involves a degree of adaptation. And the thing is, either way, whether it's a graphic novel or a screen, as I say, or a film thing, you probably want it to get made. And if you want it to get made, it's very hard to pitch something purely with a script. Now, how do I know this? Because I've tried it. And like I said, this is a little bit of story time for you. So I wanted to do an animated series of Reynard City, and eventually I do want to do an animated series of Reynard City. However, I got to the point where we were able to pitch this to kudos, the people that made Life on Mars. And thankfully I had a friend who was willing to work as our representative, who had sort of done that for us and for other people in the past, which was great. And that got our foot in the door, and it got to the point where, the makers of Life on Mars did a script reading of the 6 episodes we gave them. And in the end they chose not to do it, feeling it wasn't something that was appropriate to what they wanted to do, because even though they'd done a few different things, so like Spooks and Hustle are all very different from Life on Mars, but none of them were animated shows. So it was a punt, and it was a punt that didn't come off. Now bear in mind, that was with me, like I say, having the advantage of having worked on that series for a long time, having someone who was willing to help me out, so I had like a representative and a foot in the door, and we still didn't get to that point. Which is why I'm going to say to you, if you want a stronger pitch, then you want something to show to them. And when you want something to show to them, that could be something like, say, storyboards, or a short film. And now, like I say, you might be one of these lucky people who's also an artist, therefore you can do your own storyboards, or you could do your own miniature comic that's based on this screenplay that you have now adapted from what was going to be your graphic novel. Here's the thing. What tends to get made? The things that tend to get made adapted from other intellectual properties, and, not being funny, it has been this way practically since the dawn of cinema. Yes, original ideas have come through. Yes, original ideas do get made. I'm not saying they don't. And some of them are massively successful. And that's wonderful. Not denying that. But if you think about it, the ones that tend to be the biggest tend to be adapted from things. Like, you take the... like I said, I mean, the biggest at the minute, near enough, is Avengers Endgame, which is tussling for Avatar. And okay, Avatar is an exception. It's an original IP that somehow got to this point. And okay, yes, I can hear the sarky people at the back going, it's just the Smurfs, but dancers with wolves but in space. Yeah, when we say original, we mean not based on an intellectual property, i.e. a book or a film or video game, etc., etc. So, park the sarkiness at the back, thank you. But the idea is that, like I say, you're pitching your idea, and these are things you do. Now, what I'm suggesting is maybe get the graphic novel out first, and then you can pitch it as a potential film with a screenplay adapted from what you have, because you have an IP that they can look at, and it is something they can take from. Now, of course, for some people, like myself, you might not be an artist, therefore you want to bring people on. And again, this is another thing that I do hear people saying, and it's a refrain that we get a lot. It's like, oh, but I don't have the money for it. Now, here's where we get to the difficult question that you have to answer for yourself. How much are you willing to commit to your idea? How strong do you think your idea is? Because if you think your idea is strong, then you find ways. You find ways, and a lot of the time it will involve time and it will involve money. And the fact is, it's a lot easier to attract artists if you have some form of financial gain that they can get from this. And like I say, one way that you can make this easier is via crowdfunding. So you have things like the more, you've got the regular ones like Patreon and Ko-fi, which I think are excellent personally, because you have a regular sum of money that you can then budget, which people that can then support. Then again, you do also have Indiegogo, Kickstarter, etc., that are the one-off ones that can give you that cash boost, and we've used them as well, and they are great too. And that is where you have to kind of budget out, you have to kind of think about what the costs are, and this is where you need help from other people, and artists and what have you. Now, when it comes to this, like I say, we're going to talk about pitching in a bit, and I think that will sort of tie into it as well, because you are going to have to pitch this idea to an artist, but equally you're going to have to pitch what you can do for them. Think about it. So yeah, I think that is going to be our next stop, so if you excuse me. Right, so now I'm going to talk about, in effect, pitching your project. And pitching is going to apply to getting a potential artist on board, getting potential actors on board, getting potential, people like backers on board. Essentially, it all boils down to the same thing, which is, why is your idea good enough that they want to come on board, and what can you offer them that makes them want to join your project? This is important. Now, one aspect of this, which I think has had a bit of a dirty word recently, and I would be very careful about using this word, is exposure. So some people will pitch their project and say, I will give you exposure if you join my project. A lot of people are not going to be attracted to this for the simple reason it's a meaningless phrase. It's nothing. It's like guarantee or certificate of authenticity. Like, you could put that on there and it means nothing. What are the concrete things that you can offer someone that will make them want to come onto the project. So, the first one, and like I say, the best one, is some form of money. Like, so, some artists will have a specific page rate or commission rate, and if you can't afford it, if it's a bulk situation, maybe they'll change it for you. But what you've got to bear in mind is artists have materials, they have costs, and a lot of the time they will be doing this in their spare time, same as you're probably doing this in your spare time. So you've got to be a bit considerate of that. Now that being said, there are other options. So that you could sort of say like what we offer, which is a share of crowdfunding, a share of money that comes in from any sales from comics, etc. So getting print comics out there, and again we could talk about getting stuff at conventions, talking to local media, etc, 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 but then this video would go on for a very long time. But if you want to talk about more of these things, by all means, suggest what you'd like to know more about in the comments below, and I'll be happy to chat more about my personal experience with this, because we've been doing this for a while now. Because this is the thing, equally, and I'm not going to lie, because some will say, oh, well, you haven't done X, Y, Z. Well, yeah, but also, I have failed at these things and made mistakes, and I don't want you to make the mistakes that I've made. So I'm trying to help you out here, and, save you the stress that I had. Because this is the thing, you are pitching to an artist, and you've got to sort of say to them, what can you do for them? And if in the instance that you can't give them money, and now likewise, again, ask yourself some brutal questions. Are you spending money sort of going to films quite a lot, or a gym membership you don't use, or a streaming service you don't use, or, any number of things that, can you sell off your games console, all these things. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh, but I don't want to, again, how strong is your commitment? It's a question you've got to ask yourself. It's, as I say, it's a fundamental thing, like how far are you willing to push this? Because it might be that this idea is not as strong as the amount of time and effort that you need to put into it. Therefore you move on. That is completely valid. Don't worry about it. Sometimes you'll go through this process and it won't be worth it and you move on. That is totally fair enough. But anyway, I digress. So it's like, how can we sort of do a more positive version of helping someone get out there? So one example, which I've done for artists and other talent in the past, is say they apply for a job. Oh, can I use you as a reference? Of course you can. Doesn't cost you anything, but it could help them get a job. That is an example of exposure whereby you are doing something positive for someone that's tangible and can help them. Big thing number one. Big thing number two. If you are online, say you're on Twitter, Facebook, etc., the odds are you will come across people asking, oh, I've got XYZ project, does anyone know XYZ person? You could be the person that says, oh, I worked there with this person, they were really good. Go to them. Another way of doing it. Another way of doing this is to maybe, like I said, start off with just have enough pages for, like I say, a crowdfunding pitch. Therefore, 2 or 3 pages at a more expensive rate, which could then help you get more. And then, like I say, you could then negotiate with them about merchandise, etc., etc. But you have to have that conversation. And this is just it. And again, it comes to the fundamental thing: how much you can commit to this. Now, again, we were talking about whether or not you want to turn something into a screenplay. Now, one way that you can pitch a film idea in order to get it made is to make short films. So, for example, the makers of This Is Spinal Tap did that, and that got them a feature film. And a lot of filmmakers got their breaks through short films or adverts, etc., etc., etc. So, one thing you could do, like I say, is work with local actors, filmmakers, etc. And again, something where you could potentially put a bit of money into it and help them out, or it could be, like I say, they're students and they're looking to get some form of credit, and again, you could promote them and help them out. But of course, that's the level that you're at. And of course, the difficulty, and I think this is the thing that people forget, is the flip side of these things. So, for example, like sometimes I will use DeviantArt points for commissions, and some of the stuff I've had from it, absolutely awesome. But you are under this thing where it's like you've got to be realistic. You can't really put too much pressure on people, and it is a risk. And you have to sort of say, like, what for you would be better? Spending a bit more money and getting what you want, or spending a bit less, but you might not get anything. And again, this is a question that you have to ask yourself, and it's about how much you're prepared to put in, and how much are you prepared to push, because it will be hard. And when I talk about pitching, of course, we then get to the point of who you pitch to in terms of once you're in a position to market your screenplay, your film project idea. Because the difficulty is, like you say, if you want to do a sci-fi epic, for example, you are probably not going to have the budget to do a short film in that vein, apart from very basic scenes that probably wouldn't grab people's attention. So that's a tricky bit. That is a very tricky bit. But that's the thing. If, say, what you're doing is more kind of slice of life, then it'll be a lot easier. So again, we then sort of circle back here. So what if your passion project is a massive sci-fi extravaganza? What if it is the next Blade Runner or the next Akira or what have you? Do you know what the easiest way to visually interpret this? A graphic novel. So we circle back. If you look at how they pitched The Matrix originally, they used a graphic novel artist in order to visualise the look and the idea of what The Matrix was. And obviously we don't need to go into the fact that A4 film is coming out and it was rather popular. And again, sequels aside, but that's not what we're talking about. Oh dear. But yeah, the point is, what I would suggest is that when you do these things, maybe, just maybe, focus on getting something that is tangible, that you can print yourself, that you can sell at conventions, that you can go on local media and talk about and spread the word about. And it may work, and it may not. And this is the thing. Even with the biggest hits, so like for example Pixar, if you look at the documentaries about Pixar and how long it took, even with the backing of people like Steve Jobs and George Lucas, it was a long time before they hit the heights they were. I mean, Marvel, on the verge of bankruptcy and now one of the biggest studios out there under Disney. These things are not instant. They are not overnight successes. And it is very rare that that's the case. Now, some people... Now, I'm not going to sort of say that if you're really positive and you work really hard, you'll definitely get a hit. I'm not telling you that. It is really hard. Some people get luck. Some people don't. And some people will have connections that mean that their dad that owns a corporation can let their son create their own films. That can happen. And those people will probably have it a bit easier than someone who's trying to do this break for themselves. And I think, you sometimes see these stories about, well, when I was a lad, I did this, and this, and it meant that I could do here, and if you did that, you achieved that. It's like, no. Again, the world is a bit different, and it is harder because, the people who can take internships, or can sort of do this work, do tend to have, like I say, advantages that other people don't. And that's okay. I think to say that some people are going to have more connections and more luck than others due to certain circumstances, that is valid. And I think I'm not going to say that, you make excuses. No. But it does mean, if you really believe in what you're doing, then you've got to push harder. And it's going to be tough. And you have to decide for yourself whether you want to do that. Because the reality is, sometimes you might do this, and for all your effort, you might not get the reward. And a lot of the times you may find that you work really hard, and like I say, the breaks don't come through. But in the process of doing this, You might meet someone and they might, want someone to work with them on their project, and that could lead you in a different direction, or it could introduce you to a type of work that you didn't think of. And breaks can happen in ways that you don't expect because you took a risk that other people didn't. Going to a networking thing when you're not that confident, or sort of reaching out to creative people that you wouldn't have done otherwise. So even if, like I say, a particular project that you wanted to happen doesn't happen, you can still benefit from it, and I think this is the thing. This is what I want to say to you. The other thing I do want to say as well is, and I think this is important, so we've talked before about, like you say, what you can offer other people in terms of your project for them. How much are you prepared to back other projects? This is important because, again, you will hear people say, well, I don't have any money. Do you have a spare dollar? Do you have a spare pound? Do you, have a minute to sort of share a person's project, to give them a shout out on your website, to, say, what they've done for you, and etc., etc. It is also about doing that for other people, because if you want people to invest in what you're doing, you have to be prepared to do the same. And even if it is just one person's Patreon, or one person's Kickstarter, or one person's project that you share the page from, I think it's important, because your creative journey has value, their creative journey has value, and we all have to support each other. So that is going to lead to our outro, but I do just want to say I'm sorry if a lot of what I've said has become negative, but it is based purely on experiences that I've had, that it is going to be tough. You are going to have issues, you are going to have to learn who you work best with, change processes, and it will take time. This is what I'm saying. Think about how much you are willing to commit to this idea and how much you love it. Because in some respects it's like a relationship, and relationships don't always work. But when they do, it's beautiful and it's wonderful. And creative relationships, I think, are in some ways like that, in that when you find the people that you want to work with, stick with them, because, you can make stuff happen. So there you go. Outro time. Alrighty then, so in effect this is a little bit of a summary, and of course tying into the plug for Reynard City. Now, Reynard City is a project that I've been working on myself for over 12 years now, and I have been very lucky to work with a wide group of creative people, not just artists but also actors, musicians, website designers, local businesses. And for me, the great thing is when you can show support for them as much as they can show support for you. So for me personally, this is important. And when I'm working on this project, where possible, so for example we use Minuteman Press when we print the comics, so yeah, we could probably get a cheaper deal elsewhere, but I don't want to do that because I want to work with people that, one, I know the quality, and two, they are there, they are down the road, and it's great. And so yeah, there's a lot of places like that, which is why I'm going to say we put the credits up, etc. And this, for me, like I say, is important because, again, getting the support from this will allow us to do more, will allow us to do money, because what we do is a share of the crowdfunding money, the sales, and so anyone who's like working on the comic, they will get an amount per month, because I think that's the fairest way. But then, like I say, we try and do the same thing with people on the side. We try and do commissions where we can, because we want to promote the project. And you try and balance this out in as fair a way as you can. So if you want to be extra awesome, like I said, keep an eye out, because we're posting like ads and stuff in between. So we've got the Patreon, we've got the Ko-fi, we've got merchandise, we have got various ways that you can support us. You could just do it direct to PayPal if you want, and this will allow us to keep working with the artists that we love, keep them supported, to keep promoting them, because like I say, put like Patreon and stuff in for people as well, you know, when I like the work that they do. So, you know, like I say, you can go on our Patreon page and you can see the people I back, because I think this is important. Because if you believe in your project, then it's also important to share and support others as well. So, in effect, yes, you're going to be helping us, but if you help us, that frees us up to support other people more, you know? So, but anyway, I just want to say a massive thank you. So I'm going to be having a new video out soon, because I was at the Norwich Furmeet and I met up with Skai The Wolf, who is a wonderful YouTuber, and as a day it was a lot of fun, and it was great to kind of show him the sights of Norwich and get chatting with all the Furmeet people, and you know, it was a really cool, really positive day, and you know, it was a great experience, and I hope we can do more of that, you know. Anywho, I think that kind of covers everything. Also, with these creative tips videos, if you have a specific question about working on a creative project, if you've been watching this and you're thinking, well, I want to know more about, you know, whatever aspect I've brought up, feel free to comment below. Might reply if I see it, but equally, if there's enough that kind of comes up, we could do another video on it. I'm happy to talk with you about all kinds of stuff, you know, because a few things have come up in this whole sort of process, and we're learning all the time, you know. Anyhow, things are going to come up, but you know, keep an eye out, because more content is coming. Wow, I'm doing so well today. So yeah, awesome. Thank you very much. Much love. Bye.